Good afternoon. It is my honor to welcome you all to this pivotal panel discussion on climate resilience and insurance in the Himalayan region. As chairman of Himalayan Everest Insurance, headquartered in Nepal, I am deeply invested in the dialogue surrounding climate change adaptation and the indispensable role that insurance plays in safeguarding our communities and economies against its impacts. The Himalayan region stands as a beacon of natural beauty and ecological diversity. However, it is also one of the most vulnerable areas to adverse effects of climate change. The towering peaks, lush valleys, and pristine landscapes of our region are facing unprecedented challenges due to the escalating frequency and intensity of extreme weather events and unpredictable shifts in age-old patterns. Today, as we convene to deliberate on climate resilience and insurance, we acknowledge the urgent need for collaborative action and innovative solutions to address the multifaceted risks posed by climate change. Insurance, as a fundamental pillar of risk management, serves as a critical tool in building resilience against climate-related disasters. It provides a financial safety net that enables individuals, businesses, and governments to recover and rebuild in the aftermath of catastrophic events. However, the efficacy of insurance hinges on its accessibility, affordability, and relevance to the diverse needs of our communities. In the Himalayan context, where vulnerable populations often bear the brunt of environmental degradation and resource depletion, ensuring equitable access to insurance is paramount. We must strive to bridge the gap between insurance products and the unique socio-economic realities of our region. Catalyzing inclusive solutions of this kind requires the active intersection of insurance, technology, environmental knowledge, and grassroots reach. Because of this reason, the panel today is not an insurance panel per se, but a multidisciplinary panel which represents the kind of approach that is possibly needed for us to have proactive insurance solutions to the challenges of a changing climate. At this very moment, there are several projects ongoing that are fruits of exactly this type of collaboration. While we have much to learn, these projects, some of which you will hear about on the panel today, are a strong start to climate resilience insurance products in Nepal, and I'm sure more will follow. By harnessing the power of technology, deep caring for our communities, and enabling regulatory environment, we can expand our predictive capabilities, multiply our reach, and mitigate the impacts of climate variability on vulnerable communities. Discussions like the one you are about to hear can act as catalysts for positive transformation and help safeguard precious ecosystems and livelihoods that define our shared heritage. I hope you will find this panel thought-provoking and valuable in furthering your own understanding of this issue. Thank you. I hand over to Amish.
Thank you, Mr. Shrestha. Mr. Shrestha has set the stage for a very interesting aspect of climate change and its mitigation in our part of the world, talking about insurance and how we can allow it to reach the most vulnerable communities in an inclusive and equitable way. So, but at first, I just want to get a sense of what exactly that we are facing in South Asia in terms of climate change. And I want to go to Ramesh. We've all read your stories, they've been excellent work, but tell us what exactly is happening when we say climate change is happening in South Asia. Tell us some of these stories from the vulnerable communities, what's really happening in those areas as we talk.
Thank you, Amish. I think I also should manifest the scientist kind of thing on me to tell this answer. I'm a journalist by profession. I'm an environmentalist by education. I did my master's degree in environmental science, and I became a journalist by accident. And I enjoyed that accident and became a journalist for a longer time. So I work across the Himalayas from Afghanistan to Myanmar, get to work with the journalists from across the region. And there are different stories out there. So what is happening exactly in the ground? I mean, a lot of people have told about the problems. So if you just go into levels of the problem, if you go high in the mountains, there are hazards like the glacial lake outburst flood. If you just go across the mid-hills, there's a problem of drying springs, like that was a lifeline of people to drink water. And it is happening across the Himalayas. If you go deeper down to Siwaliks or the lower, I mean, in the Siwaliks, there's a lot of this soil erosion kind of degradation kind of things. And if you move down to the south, the floods are happening more. One thing that science has told, basically has informed us, is that the number of extreme events in the Himalayas are increasing, which means like the Melamchi or Uttarakhand and Josimath, or say summer snowstorm in Kashmir, or the glacial lake outburst flood in Sikkim, right? So the pattern is changing. I think that's the key message, that the pattern is changing across the Himalayas, though the issues are different, maybe, but the pattern is changing in the last 10, 15 years. Second thing is temperature is the regime of temperature is changing, and it is above the global average. So if you say like the Earth is warming at 1.1 degrees Celsius, it is 1.5 or 1.7 for the Himalayas. So we are a bit above the global average. That is the kind of a message that is already in the domain. But I think the whole state of the community or the people is like, people are so much confused. There should have been more clarity, right? But with this new emerging knowledge that is produced at different scale, I think communities are confused, politicians are confused, we all are confused. So, for example, for us, like saying, oh, the Earth is warming at 1.1 degrees Celsius is so nice to hear, right? But if you just go and talk to a farmer saying, okay, the Earth is warming at 1.1 degrees Celsius, then he will say, thank you. Then what's that? What is that 1.1 degrees Celsius for a farmer? For someone who is in Kathmandu or in Kashmir or in Sikkim, right? So the detailing of that larger global scale of information hasn't happened in the region. I think that should have been the story that we should have. So 1.1 degrees Celsius at global scale is fine, but what is 1.1 degrees Celsius at regional scale, as district level or the ward level, right? So I think all the people have started to talk about climate change across the region, but they are talking about the same thing for years, right? So we are not moving further. I think that is the state of both the science and the communities in the region. But as you said, or people are saying technology had advanced, knowledge has been produced, but if you go and ask someone in the ground, they may not say they are affected by climate change, but there's a problem, right? So I think the whole thing is, how do we frame that problem and then disintegrate that information and feed them based on the need. I think that's where all of the communities, all of the stakeholders are now struggling.
That's a great point you've made, Ramesh, particularly about information networks and how, let's say, the knowledge sharing systems have flown down to the ground. I want to come to Sanjeevni and ask you from the similar perspective. So you worked on the ground so much. What are the sort of, let's say, issues regarding climate change are you hoping to see solutions emerge from this, the insurance sector, the financial sector, especially as Ramesh said, the idea of where technology has expanded so much. So what are the sort of solutions that you can hope to see from this sector?
Namaste, everyone. as an environmentalist and a mom, to sum up my existence in a sentence, I desperately need each one of us to change our behavior today. So if you had to ask what is the solution, it's us. The climate change is a beast that we have created together, and collectively we must come to how we can make it better. I feel like we are using our natural resources, especially the rivers, like our sewage, and the air like our dumping ground. So when you spit on, looking up, what will you will face? The same spit that you've just spit it up. So I really, it seems a little bit unpolished. This was not the beginning I had planned. But we really need to change our behavior and the way we change how we do business. Because every business now needs to work sustainably. And working in a sustainability manner is the only way we can actually, what we call prevention of loss, that is one of the biggest priorities, I believe, for the insurance sector. So I'm not somebody who's very well versed with how the insurance industry works. I understand that insurance is a big industry. It's one of the biggest industry in the world. And even though I don't have what I call the technical know-how, what I know is storytelling, and in every facet of my life, I try to depend on my ability to understand everything like a story. So in my humble deduction, this is how insurance works. Insurance covers risk. So if I have a health issue, I get covered with my insurance. If I have my factory, if my factory catches fire, then I sure hope that I have insurance. And more often than not, if my vehicle meets with an accident, then you get covered by insurance. And all three has happened to me. And the third scenario, more often than not, and every time I have really, thanked that I had insurance and it was covered. So in that true sense of covering risk, I believe that the insurance is truly a risk-taking business, and it's not for the faint-hearted. Just yesterday, I read it was one of the most stressful jobs in the world, apart from air traffic controllers. And but like any other business, what I know is it's a business. So you depend on calculated risks. So all the risks that the insurance will take depends on data and predictability. For example, I've worked in this Wildlife Conservation Nepal, my NGO, for last 20 years. 20 years, same organization. And like I said, I am a mother, so probably I'm a very predictable, boring person and a perfect customer for an insurance company, right? Because the risks are very low. But here, what we are dealing with climate crisis, finally, the debate is over. We all agree, because the last decade was about, is it for real? And there were more people saying, no, it's not. So finally, the debate is over, and the climate change, however, has now turned into crisis, which means that every time an insurance is trying to tackle climate crisis, it is dealing with unpredictability. So the calculated costs, the calculated risks, I think, is really not there, because the predictability is not there. And what I read, so I was trying to read what insurance calls natural catastrophes, or natural disasters, as we call, which is like a very important indicator of climate crisis, is natural catastrophes, what we call NatCat. That was a cool term I learned just recently preparing for the panel. But what I learned is that in 2020, there was a total loss of $176 billion because of natural disasters, and 40% of it was insured. But it was one of the biggest losses for the insurance business that year, which said, a report said it was the biggest loss since 1970s. There was some disaster there that was unpredictable. in 1970. So which means that the risk for the risk takers is going to be even bigger. And how we are going to maneuver in this scenario I think, is the trick. But we are truly together in the front lines, and we need to have insurance cover us smartly. The solutions could be, for example, because of the Nat Cat, most of the insurance have now stopped covering establishments and people living in the coastlines. And this is in areas which has oceans and seas, and in the Himalayas, we've not even begun our insurance practice. So we can see this divide and already predict that what is going to be the scenario for the insurance companies. Sorry, Mahindra, sir, from here. But having said this, what I also learned is that insurance also started working with the governments, demanding better building codes. Building codes that will ask the people to build their homes better, build houses better, have building codes, security systems in place, and also asking for or supporting green buildings, for example. So I'm really hoping that the insurance industry will help in moving the needle towards mitigation as well as changing behavior of the customers, demanding government to work with them to make things insurable. For example, like really working hard on policies, legislations that are green, supporting businesses and service providers who are green. Because what I see is in the banks, there is a prioritization in there. I think my husband was a banker for a long time. And whenever I asked him about, do you support green businesses, he would say, we are supposed to, but they don't. But we really need the insurance people to be beyond the banks, because you are the risk takers, and support these schemes that are like climate smart agriculture sector, renewables energy sector, so you can really move the needle in a positive direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjeevani. Gaurav, I want to come to you. Leading on from Sanjeevani's point and coming to an industry perspective, so how do you see this intersection of climate change and insurance in South Asia right now? What's happening in this sort of intersection?
So on a lighter note, first, Sanjeevani, getting back to you, if you think you're boring, you haven't met enough insurance professionals. We're far more boring than you are. So Amish, to answer your question, I think climate change is a global phenomena. Every country, every society across the world, they are struggling to deal with it. If we zoom in a little and focus a bit more on South Asia, I think the problem gets more accentuated purely because most of the countries in South Asia are still not as developed as the Western world. And climate change, according to me, affects in two different ways. It affects the economy overall, on an overall basis, but what it does is there are people who get affected on an individual basis because they lose their life and livelihood due to certain natural events. And these are often the marginalized sections of the society. It also affects in a very big way large corporations. The panel before us had an extensive dialogue on hydropower, for example. So if we link this back to Nepal specifically, hydropower is one of the most important sectors within Nepal as a contributor to the overall economy. And it is very, very susceptible to natural events which are largely caused by climate change, whether it's earthquake or an increased phenomena of flooding, glacier outbursts. It's all linked eventually to global warming. And what is global warming? Nothing but climate change. So the intersection between insurance and climate change is actually very natural, because insurance in a big way has been supporting societies and economies to deal with events when there is an unforeseen and uncertain and unfortunate event, whether it's an earthquake or a flood or lightning strike or whatever you want to call it. What has happened over the last 20 years is that insurance has come at the forefront of finding new age solutions, how to deal with climate change. We obviously can't arrest climate change, and I wish there was some more dialogue around that area. But what we are trying to do is we are trying to provide relief to people who suffer from events related to climate change. Now, to give you an example, for example, in South Asia, Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam, all three of them as countries have started working on a program to help their fishermen. When the tide is too high, they can't go out and fish. If they do, they're risking their small fishing boat and themselves. So there are events like that which can actually be tracked with the help of technology, that yes, it was a high tide which did qualify for fishermen not to go out and fish, but because that person has lost his livelihood for that day or for a few days, there are insurance solutions available or can be created to pay for their loss of income. Similarly, if you look at it, as I said, there are two sides of it, and the other side is the institutional and corporate side of it, which is, and I'm taking hydropower as an example because it would resonate with most of us in this hall. The entire Himalayan belt, and whether it is in Bhutan, Nepal, India, it's very, very susceptible to certain natural events, and we've seen that. There's somebody in the room, and I won't name him, but I think most people can guess, who's cut a check for $60 million to pay for an earthquake event to a hydropower company, which was a result of earthquake, right? We need to have solutions which will work specifically to certain sectors, certain industries which are more exposed to natural disasters than others. It's not to say that a petrochemical plant is not exposed to climate change, it is. But there are things like hydropower sector, or for that matter, tunneling of building roads, especially in the mountain ranges, which is far more exposed, and there are solutions to it. The problem is, there is sometimes not enough data for people like us in the insurance sector to create the right solution. And probably I'm going to get some backlash on this. There is also not enough appetite for people to pay for those solutions. So while we can put forward solutions which will protect the balance sheet and which will protect the life and livelihood of people, we need more support from governments who have to think of their citizens. For example, in 2015 we had a massive earthquake in Nepal, right? There are countries in US or the developed world, for example, even Mexico, who buy catastrophic bonds to provide relief for their citizens. So if there's a tornado or a cyclone or something of that sort, or even a wildfire in California, the government takes insurance to ensure that people who suffer will get compensated. I think that sort of initiative is lacking in South Asia in a big way. I'm very happy that certain countries, much smaller countries like Indonesia and Philippines and Vietnam, have started thinking about it. But I think the Himalayan belt definitely has to think a little more about it, because our dependence on our resources is within the Himalayan belt.
Thank you, Gaurav. That's an excellent point that you've made. I want to come to Omkar and just ask him, how do we leverage technology to make insurance inclusive and equitable in terms of access? How do we make it available to all, from what Gaurav just said? I believe there is a term called parametric insurance. I think that's an idea that's been floating around in terms of resilience to insurance responses to climate change.
Thank you, Amish. Good afternoon, everyone. First, let me start with the central theme of this event: climate, connectivity, and community. I believe insurance can play a pivotal role to coordinate or connect between climate and community to increase the resilience of people. Having said that, if we talk in particular case of Nepal, the instances of climate risk is increasing, and Nepal is considered as one of the most vulnerable countries. But insurance penetration, though gradually increasing, is not at the acceptable level. Last year, Nepal Rashtra Bank conducted a survey, and it showed that only 9% of people have access to non-life insurance. So there is a huge gap. And that's where technology and player like eSewa can bridge the gap in close coordination with insurance company. Let me share some of the example of what eSewa is doing. We are closely working with insurance industry to make insurance affordable and accessible. So we are working to make bite-sized insurance products so that it is affordable. People can buy insurance products. People don't perceive insurance as an expensive product. So there is one product that we are offering where people can pay ₹1 a day to get coverage of 230,000. What we are also doing is embed the product at the customer journey. For example, if a person buys a ticket from Kathmandu to Dubai through eSewa, at checkout, he or she can buy travel insurance. And we are also leveraging our agent networks, which are located in all 753 municipalities to promote the insurance. Because in insurance, we don't fully go digital. There is a term we use called phygital. There has to be a combination of physical as well as digital interaction so that people can purchase the insurance products. And now we are shifting from these low-hanging products to products that cater to climate risk. We are working with Himalayan Everest Insurance as well as Nepal Economic Forum to develop heat insurance products. Like Gaurav mentioned, the product is available in Philippines and other countries. So we are also envisioning a product let's say, if a worker lost income because of the increased heat in particular area, we can compensate. So in that way, we are working. We recently also integrated the product, property insurance products, whereby people can purchase insurance products from their smartphone. They don't need to go to insurance branches. So that's what we've been doing, and I see there is a lot of potential to increase the accessibility, increase the penetration of insurance from low level of penetration that we are seeing now, and there is a huge opportunity to work on that. And just to touch a little bit on parametric insurance, I was also part of the team to design and roll out the weather index insurance products for the first time in Nepal back in 2016. But there are challenges of scaling up those parametric insurance products because of the diverse geography, diverse topography. Weather station of one particular area might not reflect in another area, though it's nearby. So that is some of the challenges that we are facing. And also because of the persistent presence of cloud, satellite imagery and data is also not that predictable to make parametric insurance scalable and wider scale. That's the challenge that we see so far.
Thank you, Omkar. I want to come back to Ramesh and extend what he asked and what he left at the first question. He's talking about communication of climate change towards the most impacted communities. I want to ask you, where do you see this climate change governance, policy making, tuning into this communication bit, especially towards these vulnerable communities? Where do you think is the gap there?
Thank you, Amish. I think before you communicate, you need to be clear, right? So if you want to be clear, you need to have that information that feeds you to become clear. And that's where the problem is. So my teacher, late teacher, Prahlad Yanjan, used to say, Ketao, we need good science, Science is fine, there's science, but get out good science. And you need good science. So if you invest in good science, or if you invest in making a science good, then only you can inform yourself and make a decision based on it, right? So I think the whole problem with our climate thing is we have been repeating the same thing for decades, but we are not saying what we exactly need to make a decision. Let me tell you one example. So a couple of weeks ago, the ward chair of Pokhara, where you belong to, he decided to ask all the villagers to cut trees. He said, like, there was a a campaign saying, cut my trees. So he said, like, cut all the trees around you that you own, because there are so many monkeys out there. And people just ridiculed him. But I think he's right. He was right, actually. And then because he tried to do something, he couldn't do it. He doesn't have tools, techniques, help at all. So everybody came to him and he said, let's cut the trees. And then last year, I think in a few months back, Nepal's prime minister decided to ban TikTok, right? And then he thought that's a problem, he banned it. So the basis for the prime minister to make a decision on banning the TikTok and the basis for that ward seer to make a decision to cut trees was same. So what is the basis of making a decision? How do you make a decision? I mean, how are you informed about something and you make a decision, right? That's where, I mean, you have to back up yourself with such a solid evidence to make a decision, which doesn't happen in this part of the world. So, as Omkarji was saying, what is happening really in the ground is we have not invested so much or minimum in a public asset like hydromet services. So, for example, in 1970s, when the Department of Hydrology and Meteorology was established, they had few stations, and in last 50 years, we all have been relying on the same data, temperature, rainfall. Everybody is relying on that. And now the country has 282 weather stations, and then there's one in Jumla, one in Doti, and 6 in Manang, and then you are going with a scheme, right? Insurance scheme. And you have a weather station, one weather station in the whole district, and you make a decision based on that information. How can you make it? How can you just make it scalable, right? And that's why I'm saying, in a so diverse region as ours, where you can just fly for half an hour and go to 100 meters, and if you fly up half an hour, you go to 8,848 meters, right? You are in a village, if you just walk down half an hour, you go to Besi. If you just walk half an hour, you go to Kharka. Now, we have to make a decision. There are three climate, there are three microclimates. There are three kind of, cropping system. There are three kinds of people. There are three cultures. And you have to make a decision based on that, right? It's such a microclimatic, such a micro-regime system that we live in. So it is very nice, but it is very, very diverse. It is very, very intense, and we should understand this process very well to make a decision. I think the whole process, there's a realization that climate change is impacting, but the problem is we all are reiterating the same thing for long. I think we need to have a pathway where you should say, next 5 years, we'll have 1,000 weather stations. In next 10 years, we'll reach all these people by this. Like electricity, they say like in 20% to 40%, 60%, 90%, and there should be a kind of a target for everything, like this hydromet services, information, communications. And one thing that hasn't happened actually in this part of the world is we are talking too much about awareness, but we are not giving alternatives. Unless you give alternative, nobody will care about it. For me, like if you travel across the Himalayas from east to west in Nepal and ask a farmer, and say, what is the pressing problem that you are facing? He won't say climate change. He will say monkey. Everybody is talking about monkey in this country, and nobody is going to deal with it. Now he will say, I will shoot you, I'll shoot monkeys, or I'll cut trees, because he's so frustrated actually, right? So there is a climate information fatigue already in the villages. If you go and ask, everybody comes. When I was in Mount Everest, in 2009, Nepal's prime minister went with all the ministers for the cabinet meeting, and then I was standing, beside this Sherpa, and then he said like there was a meeting and everybody was talking about climate, and he said like everybody comes here and says that if there is a glacial lake outburst flood, we will die. Don't tell me. I know. I don't need a scientist to tell me that if there is a glacial lake outburst flood, I will die. You should tell me how I survive. What is the plan for me to just take me from that point to a safer place? Nobody talks about it. So we are creating a regime of fear. The regime of fear won't help you to solve the problem. I think that's the problem that we are facing right now across the Himalayas, And we need to be more pragmatic. And we have been using the resources so badly. We need to use the resources wisely. We are training one person 5 times with the same tools for the same capacity building. I mean, you are the 5th one to go to the same place, give the same tools, and train a woman with the same techniques. I think we need to diversify this, and we should accept that we are really being nice to each other. I think we need to ask right questions to each other. We are not asking people, we are a consortium. We just, pat our things and, hey, yeah, we are doing well. But I think we need to ask real right questions to each other to make changes.
Thanks, Ramesh. I think that's a very interesting point you raised about human-animal conflict that's increasing in Nepal right now. I want to come to you, Sanjeevani. I know that there are instances of, let's say, livestock predation insurance, right? Like, let's say when a wild animal eats up your cattle, there is some form of insurance there. So how do you see insurance then resolving these issues? Like, let's say simple, like a monkey raiding your crop, right? Are they, let's say, can insurance provide solutions to impacted communities this way?
Of course, yes. I think where there is a will, there is a way. And I'll also touch upon what he said, like our country is really, really diverse. There are like about 118 ecosystems within a small country like ours, but our mindset is pretty much the same from north to south, east to west. And we are all very, very much, I think, in tune with our natural systems. And these problems are already there. In the last 20 years, myself, I've seen that people are really now thinking factoring in the climate business, like the climate structure in whatever business they are doing. And it should now become, I think, a very integral part of our everyday life. I understand the fatigue that Ramesh was talking about. We are also trying to operate much more in fear, and that's why the younger generation, they don't want to talk about climate change. But there are problems, very real problems like the monkeys and human-wildlife conflict. But our farmers who are operating near national parks or these areas which has like more forest, for example, they are also conditioned, they have been conditioned for a long time to work for compensation schemes. Many years ago, not many years ago, just before COVID, Mahendra sir had talked to me about like, would you be interested to see if we can work for crop insurance for people who are facing human-wildlife conflict. So during my study, what I realized was like none of the farmers, they really want to, because they are operating in very small, tight budgets, they don't want to invest in an insurance scheme, even though it would be paid upfront by a pilot, what we had imagined. Because we have been conditioned to work for a compensation-based and a subsidy-based scenario. So this is, and then they are like really working in small budgets, and they can't imagine having their crops insured because the crops themselves are very, what do you say, like before the crops would probably be degraded by animals, not very often, but now the human-wildlife conflict is also now taken care of by the government, but the climate crisis is taking over the human-wildlife conflict. So the mindset is like this. And we are moving from like wanting to have better technologies to improve our agriculture to also factoring in how the weather is going to be tomorrow. So these are very unpredictable scenarios. And but what I really think for insurance industry is because you are working in the risk sector, you must have a larger bird's eye view. And also have the toad's eye view. That's very important. But having a bird's eye view would make things much more, foolproof for the future disasters. So working very closely with the government, and what I mentioned earlier, that you can actually create mind-changing and behavior-changing with your innovative insurance products. I really want to focus the insurance sector to really have climate-focused, innovative products that can go forward.
Thank you. I want to come to you, Omkar, and just following up from that, why don't you take it up and see, how do you see this, like what, as Sanjeevani is saying, this intersection of climate and financial services, particularly in Nepal? What is the insurance sector? What are the possibilities, opportunities for you?
So in terms of opportunity, I believe insurance sector since last couple of years, they have been closely working. For example, since 2013, the insurance industry, though there was crop and cattle insurance products, from 2013 onwards, they aggressively moved toward and offered that products. But still there are rooms for improvement where all the stakeholders can join hand. Insurance companies are not getting subsidy on time, and there's trust issues between insurance and farmers that has to be worked on. There are a lot of areas where insurance can play a role, but eventually there will also be concern of premium. Because of the rising this impact of climate change, the loss will be going to increase, like we discussed about example of hydropowers. Even in local level or micro level, the loss will be increased, and whether the premium that currently insurance companies are raising would be sufficient or not, that would be one of the questions. In order to address that part, insurance has to go beyond what they are offering. So we call the tendency of adverse selection in insurance, where only risky assets are insured. So if we can scale that up across the country and offer the products obviously innovatively, where we can leverage the use of technology, and also trust and awareness part is something that the insurance industry needs to work on. So I see there is a lot of opportunity to bridge that gap and provide that solution to consumers.
Thank you, Omkar. Gaurav, I want to end with you. Diverse issues, diverse solutions, lack of information, like I said, trust issues. From a regulatory / financial, let's say the industry perspective, how do you see this emerging in the years to come now? Because climate change is here, like you said, countries are already implementing solutions. How do we see the regulatory side of this in South Asia?
I think just picking on from some of the points that Ramesh made, for example, he's quite right. As a society, and this is not just for Nepal or India or Bangladesh, I'm talking globally, we have a tendency to keep repeating the fact that there's a problem. So the message gets repeated, but there is no action around it. Or if there is action, it is probably less than what is required. And we also have to remember that insurance is the last line of defense. When everything fails, insurance is there for you to fall back on and get some relief. Insurance is not a magic wand which will take the problem away. So just because I have a medical insurance or a hospitalization policy doesn't mean I can start smoking and drinking and eat frying food. I will fall ill. It's just that somebody else will pay for it, for my treatment. In terms of, to answer your specific point regarding regulatory aspects, I personally believe there is a lot of work that needs to be done by governments in partnership with think tanks, in partnership with people of influence and intelligence who can give them the right advice. But the initiative essentially has to come from governments to say that, okay, I have recognized this problem and you have given me some inputs. Now I want to create a solution around it. That I don't see happening, or at least it's not happening enough. We've seen it in bits and pieces in India, for example. There's a very large scheme called the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, which is essentially to address crop insurance in India. It's done well, but has it done as well as it was envisioned? The answer is no. We've not done enough around aquaculture, for example. That's a very big area of income that the economy derives support from. So there is too much to be done, but nobody, or at least that's my personal view, I don't see anybody identifying what is the starting point, and I don't see governments taking ownership of that. So unless there is initiative from the government to say that, okay, I want to put a plan in place, I don't think we'll essentially keep talking about it. We'll probably have a nice gathering and we'll tell each other it's a problem, but there is no solution around it, which we will find.
Thank you. Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you, panelists. I think that was an excellent session, at least by my own reckoning. I think we have time for 2 questions, 2 or 3. So please state your name and the panelist to whom you are asking the question. And please ask a question. Keep it short, please.
Hi, I'm Srijesh from NMB Bank. So primarily, we have largest portfolio in Hyderabad. My question is to Gaurav. Say the Tista flood that recently happened had happened late 1700s. It would have been part of Nepal. So the catastrophe was so big, I'm not sure whether the local insurance companies would have been able to pay the liabilities. Yesterday itself, there was a session on insurance basically led by the IPAN for the insurance companies, like whether insurance liabilities are rightly paid or not. So in that regard, so on a time scale, so whether 200 years back or 10 years down the line, similar events are expected. So banks, finance, or any financial institutions finance, say a period of 15 to 20 or even 25 years for the long-term projects. Insurance policies are for probably 1 year. So in 5 years down the line or 7 years down the line, if there is significant change in premiums, so how would the project survive? One way. Second, for the insurance companies, as you rightly said, the insurance companies are as a fallback. So for your own survivals, to have a line where it just intersects, what could be the means that we can think about, say 15, 20 years, have a rightful protection for the investments as well as insurance company. There could be a funds or carve-outs, or how do we do that?
Gaurav, do you want to take that first? And then. Yeah.
So I think a lot of questions rolled into one, but I'll try and answer them one by one. If the reference was to the Tista loss of hydropower in India, which is in Sikkim, which recently happened, you're absolutely right. It's a massive, massive loss. The estimates are over $1.5 billion. Insurance is and will pay some part of it. There is actually a lot of, for lack of better words, there is dispute currently between what the insurance industry feels that they should be paying for versus what the client or the operator feels they should be receiving. But that apart, as I said previously, insurance is essentially the last line of defense. The smarter insurers will write the good risks and up to a certain point. And that's true in Nepal, India, London, Singapore, wherever you want to take an example from. As an insurance industry, I feel that we are doing quite a lot of work to support certain sectors. And these are sensitive sectors, say, for example, hydropower, or for that matter, even nuclear power. Commercially, it is not easy to give insurance across the board for the full value. And therefore, whatever capital can be canvassed is being canvassed by the insurance sector to provide support. I believe what is missing is that these sectors are of national importance and are of strategic importance to certain countries. And therefore, the government needs to step in and say, okay, insurance is providing you coverage up to this point. However, you need coverage of this scale. And therefore, the balance, I will step in and provide, and I will take some premium for that. Unless you see a collaborative approach between the commercial insurance sector and the government, I don't think you'll ever have a solution which is to your complete satisfaction. so that's one part of some of the points you raised. I don't know if I've answered all of it, but one aspect that you said, how are insurers making sure that, that we sustain ourselves when such big losses are happening, and how do we continue to do our business? For that, we buy reinsurance. And if that is not enough, we actually rely on the capital market. As I said initially, for very large risks, there is a concept called catastrophic bonds, which are issued in the capital markets. And we basically try and get retail investors to subscribe to it, institutional investors to subscribe to it, so that we are not exposing our balance sheet to the fullest extent to any one event. That's how we manage risks. But yes, there is no perfect solution. But at the same time, I believe we've done enough work in Nepal, for example, specifically talking about ourselves with our partners, HEI, and we've insured hydropower assets. We've paid some massive claims. Is the insurance sector in Nepal on its own capable to insure the hydropower assets? I don't want to sound controversial, but I believe it should be better managed. They need to rely on international reinsurers a lot more than they are relying right now.
I think we have time for one quick question. Anyone else? Oh, at the back. Oh.
Thank you. This is Ms. Bhupin from Himalayan Future Insurance. My question is to Isewa, Omkar. Since you guys are dealing with or catering services to the mass population in Nepal, so how do you see, as we all know, this climate, because of the climate change, there's a lot of disasters happening every year. So how do Isewa see as their own preparation to serve or help these people when they are in disaster? So what kind of disaster management do you have taken so that at the time of disaster, you can actually make an impact to those people who are already affected when there is no transportation and communication available? Thank you.
Omkar?
Thank you, Bhupendra. So I'll answer focusing mostly on insurance. What we are trying to do is, I also mentioned earlier about the embed the insurance, make the product adjacent to their customer journey so that they can purchase the insurance and manage seamlessly. I shared example of travel insurance. We are also doing, for example, collecting the property taxes of municipality. And our intention is when people pay property taxes, we'll also show like you can get insurance at as little as possible, because there is a perception that the insurance is expensive. That's not. So we will allow people to make seamless purchase and journey easier. And also, if I purchase insurance products and if I'm purchasing voluntarily, there's tendency to forget. For example, if my bank or financial institution purchase the insurance and then they will renew, but as an individual, if I buy, I tend to forget. So that is something we're also managing because we are giving regular reminder. So that way, we are trying to expand the insurance by closely working with the insurance industry as well as regulator to help prepare community in the disaster event.
Thank you. Thank you, Omkar. But we are almost out of time, but thank you, panelists, for entertaining me. And just bearing with me for this time being. And thank you, Sujeev, for holding this. I hope you guys all had a good time.